All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Overdose and Chill Live today, episode 133. I'm Jordan Hunter. I'm the technical director at the Overdose US office, and I have here with me our awesome senior user experience director, Andrea Gonzalez. Thanks for being here, Andrea. And yeah, welcome. We're glad you guys were able to join us today, and be sure to, as we get started here, just make sure that we are broadcasting live on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And if anybody has questions, you're able to submit those questions in the comments as we go through this episode. So again, thanks for being here, and we'll get started and jump in. So today the topic is about doing a phased approach, taking a phased approach, and what that looks like, what that can look like for website redesign or replatform projects that Overdose does. And so we'll be diving into that and kind of what the important piece of that is, or the use case that we are applying this phased approach to is for when we have a client that needs to have some sort of a minimum viable product to go live, and then we kind of do an iterative approach post that MVP go live. So, Andrea, welcome.
Thanks. Always nice to chat. And Jordan, you and I recognize this as a topic because it seems to be even more relevant when we're talking to clients. So for context, Jordan and I sit in the senior consulting group in the Americas team, and we're at the front end and ideating solutions and involved in onboarding clients and introducing them to Overdose all the way through implementation, and then even post that in what we call a retainer phase and continuous improvement. And we're seeing that clients are kind of coming in with use cases that feel like they're very relevant to this phased website approach, but have come in with a preconceived idea of like, hey, we are here to engage you as one of many different potential partners, and we're going to do this really long website development process. So just tell us how it's done. So yeah, excited to actually talk about the benefits and what we're seeing in the implementations that are already happening with this phased delivery. So yeah, it should be good, but I think we should probably start with a definition. So Jordan, what do you see as being that phased website redesign approach?
It's a good general question, but I think simply put, the phased approach is simply just kind of breaking out of that mindset or that misconception of doing the whole website and replatform redesign all in one chunk, and trying to get out of the box a little bit and break that into some smaller, sizable pieces that will make the process a lot smoother and hopefully a lot more fun. And just by breaking down those pieces into those more modular pieces or the phases, that we are able to then focus a lot more in detail in each phase and really have high quality work done and deliver products in a much more complete and efficient way. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say to add to that, MVP, because it's a term that there's no doubt, people have heard mentioned and it's been thrown around. But in this scenario, MVP is definitely lean. Like I'm not going to mince words. It is about leveraging out of the box platform and a theme that will help represent your brand. And in the meantime, we are doing diligence around user research and user experience strategy, which I'll be able to talk to in a few minutes, and then developing the designs for future phases that the team is going to be prepared to be launching very soon after MVP. So that's exciting to actually see it broken out into realistic value streams and realization, rather than just one big bang that most people are probably familiar with.
Yeah. So kind of on that note, what is, to give us some perspective and contrast about this phase approach that we're going to be talking about today more in depth versus kind of the more traditional, or what people mostly think about when we talk about site redesign or re-platform?
Yeah, I'd say with website redesign projects, most people are thinking it's from scratch, and then it's going to take multi-years and multiple, just either 1 year and a half, 18 months plus kind of thing. And that the objective is to sit in a room for hours and hours on end to think through every requirement that you could conceive, and then design for that, and don't see those designs in production until the year and a half. So I think that's been a bit of the experience for many clients, including me, in the past, versus, and that big bang kind of, let's perfect, let's really make sure and feel like this represents everything we want and more, has been the mentality that most people are kind of thinking of. But this MVP approach really leverages the fact that the software is really emerging so fast, and be able to be turned on so quickly. And I, as a business owner, want to be able to leverage that and get revenue ahead of those 18 months and throughout those 18 months. And I want my users to actually see benefit too. Goes hand in hand. Is the big difference there with, but yeah, that's the traditional approach.
Yeah, I think that that you bring a good perspective from being a client, or being on that client side, and how that can sometimes be perceived from their end of what is a redesign or re-platform to them. I feel like, for me, in my experience, it has that a range of people that think that it's just a simple web re-platform is a kind of a simple process, should just be a quick and easy, 1 or 2 month thing. Or some, clients that have a larger business or a larger site, they have a little bit more awareness that it's going to be, it could be a year and a half or that 18-month thing, but they don't really understand what happens within that time frame, right? And so this new MVP approach can really help them kind of break that onto those smaller pieces, and so they have a better understanding of how the whole project runs and how we can make it in a strategic way. I think that's a key word, that with the phased approach, the idea is to do it in a very strategic manner to help the clients get the most benefit out of their website as we go through each phase. And I also see it as we kind of get into more of the world where we're seeing more headless or composable approach to building their a client building their whole business and their website specifically around a composable architecture, that this more phased approach leverages really well into that, because of it's a very modular architecture. And so you can really focus on those kind of core features to start with, and do those really well, and then just kind of iterate on that. And then we'll be going through that in more in depth here in a minute.
Yep. And given we have done it for at least a couple of clients, and more and more, can you talk through what that process of that phased approach actually looks like?
Yeah, so we've done this for a couple of clients now that I think has worked really successfully. But the MVP is kind of the first phase, and that's just coming up. MVP stands for minimum viable product, and so it's just coming up with that very fundamental site that may not have all the bells and whistles, may not have the full complete design that the client's looking for the end result, but it helps us to focus really more on the fundamental pieces or core features of the business and make sure that we really do those really well and get that foundation really solid. I kind of see it as kind of building, when you build a house, you need to make sure that the foundation is really solid. And so it's the same with this. The MVP gives us the opportunity to really make the website foundation super solid, from the backend perspective of getting like data migrated over if it's a re-platform, integrations performing as they should, and then we're able to then kind of focus more on the user experience on top of that and iterate through designs and additional features throughout that. So to me, that's kind of what the minimum viable product is. And it's also kind of meant to get a site out the door fairly quickly if there's a timeline around that too. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think from a practical level, from a design perspective, that MVP is stigmatized word, and a lot of people would see it as disappointment, but it really isn't. Like, it's leveraging a very solid theme and template that exists, that's been optimized for conversion rate, even page performance. Like, immediately you will see, and your user will see a difference, and ease, not just from your platform but from the design through MVP. But in the meantime, as we're building that, as we're kind of going through that MVP phase, we are developing that user experience strategy. So that's our North Star of who our user is, and a deep understanding of performance and analytics and growth. I'll talk to you a little bit more about it in a minute, but and then that will lead into, once we've got that clear understanding of our user and the business goals that it aligns to, then we go to ideation in design, go through low fidelity and full fidelity designs. So look, that can be a bit of a mind shift, because for our client just recently, I take my hat off to them, because they could have confidence that MVP was the most important thing to release. And although we were already starting to see designs that were future state and that they really, of course, would want for day one, they, stayed disciplined and really said, nope, we know our business goals are to realize revenue. We've got a busy sales season coming up ahead. Our tech stack right now is going to break. And this MVP is really important for us. So they did a fantastic job while still, harmonizing and getting a lot of clarity around that user experience vision, and then, starting design. And then after design, through that period where we go into phase two, maybe you can elaborate about the phases that come.
Yeah, I think, again, kind of an important thing to note here is that breaking up in these phases, and once we get phase two kind of out the door and you've been working with the client on the user strategy and some of those designs leading up to phase two, which is usually, at least there's a phase two. There could be additional phases. It's kind of it's very versatile that we can apply it differently to each client case by case. But the idea is that phase two is building out the rest of the finished and finalized designs and get user experience to the level that we feel is best. And so it's just coming up to that final launch that we do with the end product, however long that takes, and whatever subsequent phases. And then, of course, it's not for Overdose, at least it's not the end after launch. So we do, that kind of leads into a retainer phase, if you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
We call it retainer phase at Overdose. More kind of broadly, it's continuous improvement. So that is about tapping into our full digital services. So that's when we can go deeper into things like SEO and paid marketing and email marketing and data and analytics. And by then, we've certainly got enough data. We've got the experience that we landed for MVP that we're learning from with shipping and measuring, and then we're adjusting and rolling out the new designs to respond to that. And then we've got this whole other team to really encourage that growth, and be thinking about, well, how do we bring more traffic to the website? It's not just a platform, it's not just technology. We need to really be smart in who we're bringing, who's more likely to convert. So often we see kind of clients go, all right, well, now that we feel good about this product that's in market, we really want to improve our cost to acquire our customer. And that will kind of turn them to organic search. And to be brutally honest, when I do see the analytics of a big bang website project, I do see a big drop in organic search. That's the kind of the business risk that seems to occur, or the business issue that kind of seems to occur the most with not using a phased approach. Whereas a phased approach, you're sticking to the same URL structure, the IA content, and leveraging that, and then making iterative improvements and consciously aligned to that strategy. And then you can continue to tweak, like with paid marketing. We're having clients tell us, like, I'm relying on a lot of brand terms right now for return on ad spend. So we couple that SEO effort and into non-branded, and go, well, okay, well, how do we win other sources of traffic, and how do we generate that interest to the website? And then there's email, like, really kind of consciously thinking about lifecycle marketing and journeys and always on, plus campaign optimization. So there's just continuous, always something to be done, and I think that it can often be a step, particularly in a long, exhausting redesign 18-month project, that you absolutely don't want to think about. But to be honest, like, it's probably the most crucial period, post-launch of that optimization, traffic generation, think conversion rate optimization, and of course, like, tech tuning and platform, and leveraging the roadmap of the investment, of the platform you just invested in, whether it's Shopify, BigCommerce, others.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that the phase approach kind of gets both us and the client into that kind of iterative mindset, so that by the time we get to post-launch, and it's like, okay, like, what's next? And that leads really well into that retainer that Overdose can offer, with all the different services that we provide across the spectrum. It's not just development work that we do. We can do marketing and email and all of that, and that just continues to be that same iterative process where our CSM team will do a quarterly QBRs and review data and look at what the next focus point should be, and so it's just always that iterative process. So those two phases, the retainer phase and the project phase, kind of can lead into each other really smoothly with this new kind of phase approach idea.
Very well said. Or maybe, if you don't mind, Jordan, can you talk to some of the use cases that we think phased approaches apply to really well?
Yeah, I've listed a few, or that have a few top of mind, that the phase approach lends itself really well to. And the first one is for the first one that comes to mind is for any highly complex system where there's just if it's super complex, it can be just too much to keep track of everything at once, and so breaking it into different pieces can really help make that a lot more easy to get through and digest, and make sure that we tackle those fundamental items first, do them really well, again, kind of building that really solid foundation. And so a phase approach can work really well for those highly complex system use cases. And then the second one is where a client might have a lot of features and functionality that they need on their site, but trying to group them all into one project may be just too much. maybe too much budget wise, maybe too much just intellectually wise, just trying to keep track of everything. So breaking out into a phase approach in the sense of where we're gonna, we're gonna section these things that we consider as, super fundamental and super required requirements for the site to be done in the first phase, and holding off some of these nice to have features, in a later phase, and kind of tackle it that way. Another use case would be if a client is doing a complete redesign or rehaul of their site or replatform. And so when in that use case, it's very typical that there has to be some sort of a data migration and systems integrations that those alone are very stressful and large tasks to tackle. And so in that case, we typically take the first phase or the MVP phase to not focus on the design so much, like we've kind of mentioned, and just kind of sort of pick a theme to start from that we rebrand, but rather focus more so on the back end side of getting those integrations done really well and making sure that we're not we don't have any oversight on those important business features, and making it so that we can automate those processes as much as possible. So being able to focus on those important key data pieces can be super helpful, just to not be distracted by the other phases of the site. And then we've kind of talked about how as the industry goes more towards the headless or composable architecture, I've read a few use cases, or case studies, I should say, from some of the platforms that we use, about clients that have they've used a phased approach to take only part of their site headless or composable to start with, and then slowly bring the rest of it to not cause some of those disruptions that you talked about, like SEO might be a good example, but to cause less disruption to their site, they just kind of slowly take pages incrementally to a headless nature versus the platform or theme approach. So that's another use case. And then one of the last ones here that I have is about startup businesses that just need a site quick to market. They're ready to start selling their product now, and they just need something up, and they don't know exactly maybe the full direction that they want to go, but they just want to use their website to help fund whatever that additional direction or that the site will go. And so just again, going to that MVP state where we spin up a site and we use a pre-built theme that we just brand to their brand, and then that site can now start selling their product, and that those sales can then start to fund the additional phases of the project to get them, and it will help get them to where they need to be.
Definitely. I would also add that particularly relevant when the customer problem is more known. You're not working from, a complete, I have no idea how users are interacting with my website. And we help you right through of gaining that understanding, but or I have no idea of my brand and I want to experiment and see, I'm still thinking about styles, and that's where an MVP I think it's still possible, but you really do need to apply discipline. And again, kind of thinking of a client recently that had their objectives in mind, which were, hey, we have a high kind of sales season coming up. We have to get off this stack. Let's just orient ourselves towards that. And so it could just cut some of the tangent and dream or the future state conversation to know here and now, and then let's park, but still valid. I hear it, but let's consciously kind of park our conversation for the next phases. So I'd say where business, in an ideal world, it would be when business risk is low, so you're not kind of about to have your biggest sales day of the year is
Black
any
Friday.
agency's exactly any agency's dream. But of course,
Right.
like, sometimes that just is the reality of, like, you've got to get something up for holiday season. So we understand, and thankfully we're seasoned and strong in our process. But I'd say in the ideal world, it would be, let's launch MVP in a sales period where you can be a little bit more experimental, and then, we've got those fast follow and continuous improvements to come through, and then your teams gain more confidence with the platform. I think there is natural nervousness to MVP and even more so to like big bang launches, but MVP, there's always that tension, and then that kind of comes, that relief is immediately realized, and then you can keep rolling it out. So again, kind of aiming for a period where you've got all your team on board. It's not chaotic sales period. You have everyone's focus and health in mind as you're building out this, because it is very rapid. We're talking about 3 or 4 months to get MVP out.
Yep.
Lots of quick decision making, and you want everyone to be in their best headspace to be able to do that. Maybe, Jordan, let's talk a bit more about the benefits of taking a phased approach. I'd love to hear that from you.
Yeah, I mean, just from a high level, if you think about breaking up a project into smaller pieces, it can seem like that's a good organized way to do it, which we found it is, but it also can make it seem that the project is more complex. But really, we've found that it has actually helped make our projects run a little bit smoother overall, breaking them out into those smaller chunks, and even sometimes makes our process a little bit quicker, because there are fewer things on our mind, fewer decisions that need to be made if we're breaking it into those different phases, and which also makes it more reliable in my mind, because we're kind of more focused on just one piece at a time, and so we can really focus and do those pieces really well and make sure that we capture everything and make sure we don't miss anything. There's less risk of oversight, which also, any way that we can reduce the amount of bugs that come out of QA or oversight that come out during UAT. The worst experience is when you get to an end of a project and you're doing QA and UAT and you're like, oh, we totally didn't even think about this, right? And so breaking it up into those sizable chunks can greatly reduce that risk of those oversights, because we're really able to focus on each piece and make sure that we do those well. And as we do that well, I think that it saves us time and is more cost effective, because if we follow the more traditional approach and we're trying to do everything all at once, there can be overstepping or people stepping on each other's toes or overwriting code here or there, and we have to go back and redo it, or there's just a lot of kind of rework that can happen. And so by bringing it out into these smaller phases, we mitigate those risks and just do things very succinctly and have less risk of going over budget for silly things that shouldn't happen typically. Also, we've also mentioned in the use case of like a startup that the site can also kind of help fund the additional phases. If we throw up an MVP, it can start making money for that company to pay for the additional phases or additional work.
Definitely.
And then
even aside,
just overall better quality of work, more manageable, and go ahead.
I think that revenue realization is incredibly powerful and I have just been in the situation of having to put together business cases for these website redesign projects, and just no leadership team, no executive finance person will ever feel comfortable with running contracts twice, because you're paying, of course, for the new platform, and you're still kind of running the old platform with the big bang approach and not seeing revenue. So it is
Right.
incredibly heartening, and we get a really positive response from clients when it's like, oh, a few months later from our initial chat, to have a live website that is that's generating really solid revenue and incremental is what I'm seeing in the lift. There is a lift, and then there's going to continue, to be that lift. So I guess what I was trying to say is it's not just for startups. So the revenue, I just want to underscore the real benefit there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, kind of on that note, just to kind of tie into that, the phase approach, is very, in our opinion, very flexible, and we've kind of, like I say, we've done it case by case basis, but it could be still under a single scope of work document, but just separated into different phases, or it can be different scopes of work that are done, and but that kind of goes into that contractual point that you're talking about there too. So
definitely. It's been great to see it be easier for client teams to also adapt. Adopt the new technology. They have more time to get used to it. They don't have to be thinking about every single feature possible and how that's being used by consumers and all the bells and whistles, when you've just got a core e-commerce experience that's being released and that you can feel good in your business processes and operations processes. And it's been, for me, another benefit, really nice to see in clients. Just, I think the energy level is so different with the project team, and that includes the client, than with this phased approach, because again, you get to see there's this tension. It's not as significant because it's a managed scope. You've de-risked a whole lot. It's about giving you a solid foundation. And as soon as you see that go live, you are able to immediately keep going. So I think I just don't want to underestimate how important that is for the spirit of the team. And then, of course, avoiding surprises. And I absolutely, I love that it's not, we haven't just launched something and the bugs that naturally happen when you go to production, they're not just consumed with ERP and back-end issues. I actually, can have space to be talking about optimizations and changes for the front-end experience. So it's nice that we actually consciously go, no, let's make sure that order can go through e-com, the customer data goes through, etc. MVP, that's hardened. Everyone feels really good about that.
Yeah.
And then it's almost surface level after that. You're not hitting the deep routing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So with that, it's a lot of confidence, and that's exactly what gets sucked out of really long 18-month projects. Like this is, you're actually able to see it, touch it, feel it, talk about it, feel proud about it, train people in it, obviously, and leverage the evolving roadmap, which again is another benefit, because the Shopify and BigCommerce and others just have these more
constantly
and more
changing,
exciting. Yeah, and I want to tap into that. I don't want to wait another 10 months, because I know we've got this other stuff to build and launch before we get there. So or I don't want to have to deal with a change request because my business has changed, my business strategy. We're just launching a new product and we're in the middle of the project and we still haven't launched it yet. Like, that's a scenario that I've been in, way too often.
Yes, agreed.
And we, with this approach, we can react and pivot very quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll talk through. It'd be good just to hear about the significance of the MVP. We'd just love to hear a little bit more specifics there. Jordan.
Yeah, and I think you've already kind of just touched on it there, but for me, it's really to starting with that first MVP step of the process, or that first phase, can help us validate those core fundamental functionalities of the business or of the website first and foremost, and really kind of, again, do those really well. But I also think that it gives that MVP step, once we start seeing interaction with the MVP site that we can gain some perspective from, the user interactions or the way that the integrations are running or whatnot, and it can give us some perspective and data to course correct if we need to for the remaining phases of the project. So um, again, it's kind of going to the goal at the end. We want to give the client exactly what they're looking for, exactly what they want, right? And so if we take this more phased approach, it gives us that that MVP kind of. The significance for me is that it gives us that perspective of, are we going in the right direction, and getting that MVP out the door, then collecting some of that data can help us, again, course correct if we need to for the remainder phases of the project. And I think that it can also, again, like what you brought up, that building that confidence with the new platform to gain that stakeholder support and that confidence. Another use case I just thought of is that some clients might have multiple brands that they are ready to re-platform for whatever reason, and they may not, rather than jumping full on into the water with all brands and just going to the platform, a phased approach to that use case would be to just take one brand and re-platform it, do an MVP of that brand, and see how things pan out. Because then if it works out well, then we now have gained that confidence to move forward with the others, versus if it didn't pan out well, we can kind of scale back, and we didn't move everything at once, so it makes it less painful to revert back or change course if we need to at that point. Those are just some of my thoughts and perspectives. So
yeah.
And that kind of leads into what might be the user experience strategy phase, or how does that contribute to the overall project?
Yeah, that's my passion. I'm very happy to talk about that. Well, really, with this MVP approach, it's, think of it as like ship and measure. But in terms of like injecting a really strong understanding of who that user is, like we want to unearth that. We want to really ideally conduct user research, understand things that we didn't know about before about our target audience. Think about the jobs to be done, like really surface and understand through analytics and through qualitative conversation and feedback, their primary tasks that their current website might be blocking and hindering them from completing. And that if we can target that and in MVP, immediately we can unlock a good stream of revenue. But even going further with like, let's try to get a picture of motivation, of their motivations, their why, their hesitation, points of abandonment, reasons why they might not want to purchase. I think that there's a lot that in the unsaid or the behavior that doesn't happen kind of thing than the state of the state of behavior. So it's trying to use a mix of user research, and obviously through this rapid period we have the chance to layer on, but we want to get to that point of we've got a good understanding of pain points, unmet needs, and the vision for our website. Like, why does our website exist and how will it improve people's lives? So with that understanding, we want to align it deeply with your business and get to know your goals. So that will happen with stakeholder interviews and lots of conversation and lots of whys to get to that prioritization matrix. That when the two kind of connect of like growth plan and growth opportunities that we see in your analytics, for instance, with traffic that isn't converting or the traffic that is converting that's actually quite low right now, where can we kind of be dialing and making those tweaks? So that's an exciting period. We did it again recently with a client, and another client we're kicking off that type of work. But it's heartening to have this aligned user experience strategy understood. It just makes that MVP lean decision making possible, and because that it is actually going to make a difference to that user's life. And then also, like you, I think the MVP word is a lot of people's worst nightmare, or it's been butchered.
Yeah.
But I think what you have to really be thinking about MVP is like emotional experience, it's user experience, it's design, and it's brand. It's not just this like chopped off legs of a website or a table, whatever it
Right.
is. Just
Yep.
it's not a butchered, I can't stand the website, I don't even want to look at it. It is instead, no, this feels good and users can enjoy it, and I can see a difference in my revenue numbers as a result.
Mm-hmm.
Then just be thinking of MVP as something that is something I don't feel proud of, but instead it's that stepping stone for us to continue learning about our user and how they're interacting with the new experience, as we also learn more and more with the new tech stack that is in our hands,
Right.
and then go through that ideation and design and the phases that just continue. So it's the ultimate kind of conversion rate optimization period. And so
Right.
that carries right on through retainer and post website launch, which I think when you are doing a big bang or a traditional kind of website, you're just exhausted by the end of that website, by the end of that launch, and you're also like,
Building.
you're tapped out of ideas because you're the one generating them,
Yeah.
and then you are tapped out of funds
Yeah.
because maybe something, again, the business strategy changed, or maybe the technology needed an adjustment, so a cost blew up that you didn't expect,
Mm-hmm.
and instead that's not the case when you can actually progressively build and release by
Yeah.
phase.
Yeah, and I think that's it's so crucial. I think what you bring up, especially with the user strategy, just because that's really what brings in the revenue, right? So it's just super key that I think the MVP can
Yeah.
helps us with for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have spoken about our love for the phased approach. I think it only makes sense that we talk about some of the drawbacks and really kind of be transparent there of where there might be difficulty.
Yeah, I mean, part of the benefit of having this phased approach is that we can make it nimble to each project, but that's also kind of the challenge is that each project is its own it's its own animal to deal with, and so we have to, even though we have that flexibility and that nimbleness to be able to create the phases how we see fit, the challenge is are we we don't know, we're not really aligned to any specific process, and so we have to make sure that we nail down those phases and that those are the correct phases, and there's just that challenge of making sure that we're doing it in the best way
Mm.
possible, um, and catching all the dependencies between them because they can be different, and so it
Mm.
is a lot of things that we have to keep track of and still plan out. But I think that's one of the challenges. Another one is just maintaining consistency throughout the different phases. So often we might be changing team members throughout the build process, and so we want to maintain some sort of consistency and some sort of um,
Mm.
cadence with the project. We don't want things to start slowing down or stall out or whatever, and so having a project broken into different phases is a little bit more prone to risk in that area because we're going from one phase to another, and we may be changing out personnel during that, so that can be somewhat disruptive, and so that is a drawback or challenge that we have to kind of overcome with each time that we do this process. And then there's the risk of us kind of getting into rabbit holes and making the project more complex than it needs to be. Um, it's nice to be able to break out the project into smaller chunks, but then we can start to break them out into too many small chunks, and now it's can be less reasonable or less really complex, and be able to reach that end goal. We might start to lose focus if we start to make it a little bit more overly complex. So those are some of
Mm.
the
Yeah,
drawbacks and things that I've seen. Do you have anything to add to
that's
that?
fair. All very fair. I'd say the drawback from a business and digital marketing and design perspective is that, yeah, the really strict decision making that's required for MVP. When, of course, it only makes sense that you want to perfect and that you want everything you've dreamed of and more to be out there as the first release. And like I said, it's about how you define MVP and making sure that that does reflect, you know, your user experience strategy and the goals that you've set out for the user that connect to your business. But there is, yeah, certainly just hard decision making along the way. And I'm sure that you know, the main interface for us is our e-com teams and technology teams, but the stakeholders that clients have to kind of manage around them might not be as progressive and aware that and bought in. So I think that that's some of the change management that also needs to happen so that there's confidence. But you know, so far we've only seen relief and excitement when a customer experience team has their hands on a new website that's just launched, and immediately the issues that they've been dealing with, so the pros outweigh the cons is my point there.
Yeah, it's still challenges that we have to overcome, right? So
yeah, totally.
So we've kind of gone through the whole phased approach for, you know, a project scope, but I thought it'd be good for us to kind of just touch a little bit on you know, what are some of the key considerations when we start talking about moving into the retainer phase post-launch. Do you have any thoughts or insights there?
Yeah, I think you know, from what we see, it's about just being obsessed with that data and constantly reviewing that that performance with rigor to know what areas, you know, should be fed next, essentially, or how it should be addressed. And it's just this continuous review that we're doing with you, and you know, we're giving you the tools and the dashboards to be able to see the data yourselves too. And then anchoring on that to have a roadmap that really reflects on the changes required to make a difference to, I think, there's the big metrics like conversion, and there's, you know, bounce or you know, bounce rate. But there's also the micro metrics, like the smaller user experience metrics that lead up to conversion. So I think that's where we want to get quite studied. And honestly, sometimes, you know, often we'll realize we want to see even more funnels and more tagging. So that's totally fine. We can do that through the project, but even through retainer. And then that gives us a really nuanced view of how features are performing and how users are actually interacting with core pages like the PLP. Like if the majority of your, you know, traffic for your top converting page is the PLP, like that makes sense as an area to really be optimizing, and again looking to different. And so at that point, you're looking at user research that might be evaluative, so kind of looking to usability studies and A/B testing, or you're still kind of trying to generate feedback. So you're running kind of, whether it's focus groups or surveys, or just running a quick poll on those core pages to get some real-time feedback that will help kind of get deeper on the things that you're seeing in the data analytics. So it's this continuous look at the website, but be looking at the micro metrics leading up to conversion, not just the end point. So that's where we're with you. But I think that's probably one of the key considerations for retainer, of like that there's no website in the world that is one and done. And although you might be excited, like I said, exhausted after the 18-month project, like it needs continuous observation and improvement. Like there's users just change behavior, and you know, websites and traffic sources just continue to move, and you want to be in front of that. So think ongoing revenue. I know we're almost at the hour, so we invite, just another reminder, we invite comments and questions, you know, feed them through. We'll tap into them as we wrap up. But I've just got another question for you, Jordan, which is like, what does continuous improvement, like if you can actually talk about specifics, certainly from the tech side, especially like in the retainer period, like what is that actually? What is the team working on really?
Yeah, I mean, I think the phase approach, if done right, going into a retainer is almost a seamless experience in that, we've already kind of got the mindset of this iterative approach. We've already been doing iterative review of data from MVP through the second phase to the final, and like launch obviously is kind of like the big like landmark there in that process. But in theory, like it goes into retainer from there, and we're continuing to do that same iterative process. That to me, it seems like it would be a fairly seamless experience, and maybe changing the the focus from the actual build to other services that Overdose offers. But from the technical perspective, the continuous improvement, there's always going to be, well, typically with a site launch, there's always some post-launch bug fixes yet to be done, or we've held off some of those, kind of what we talked about before, where we've held off some of those nice to have features for the build and to do that in then a subsequent phase, or that could also be done through retainer, where we just start to take that backlog of nice to have features or requests and just iterate on those moving forward. But and we've also kind of touched on this, where the platforms that we work with, like BigCommerce and Shopify, they are continuously improving or adding new features to their platform, and or they might be improving their theme structure to be better for like accessibility or SEO and all those different aspects. And so, right, the secret to our lives is that a site is never done, and we always just have to continue to improve and build on it. So that's where it kind of leads into that retainer consideration as well with Overdose. Any follow-ups to that?
No, it just makes me think of like people hesitating with the retainer.
What might be some of those reasons? Why?
Yeah, I think often, it's hard enough to get the funding secured for a project for, a replatforming, and no one, who's looking at a P&L on a regular basis really wants to see an extra line item or an extra cost. So it'll just be just closed off to the idea. But it is actually, really important. We guide our clients through this thinking, but total cost of ownership, you've got to really formulate and understand what you are committing to. It's not just platform, it's upkeep, and it's the apps, it's the optimizations, it's the training, it's the all the other improvements that you want to be making, including and that has to come from somewhere, and that's where a retainer kind of it comes in. It is not a cost nearly the size as of a project. Like, you're not going to have the full project team equivalent a retainer. Like, in terms of it doesn't warrant it, unless there's another, that you actually want to be doing more substantial change. Like, personally, we can dial up and dial down. It's more just really thinking about how do we get the most from your budget. But then like, the way you just got to really think about it is the return that you're going to be generating, and keeping keeping an eye on how do the changes that we're implementing, how do we see them kind of generating revenue, and then actually, what did happen. So going back and seeing what benefits were actually realized. I think some of the kind of things to do, but like I said, the hesitation tends to be around cost and the thinking and the mindset that I've done it, I don't need to do it anymore, surely.
I agree that there are those cases where it's just either they just had the budget for the project and the client may not see the need at the moment to continue, but we definitely can and try to have them consider the retainer option, as we know that they will need at some point that continuous work additional. So Well, I think we're coming to the end of
Ooh.
time and
Ah,
the end of our discussion here. So it seems like we might have some time for some questions if there are any from
great.
the audience. Let's see if there are any. Not seeing any pop up. So any questions that top of mind that you might think that, oh, we got one.
Oh,
What's one mistake you've seen people make when they start with an MVP? That's a good question.
I've got one.
Go ahead.
Got an answer. I can start. I feel like one mistake is that they're not doing it strategically and they're not seeing it as the strategic roadmap. So again, thinking of user experience strategy and then connecting to your business. So if you're just launching an MVP, it's going to feel disappointing. It's going
Yeah.
to feel like the end when it's absolutely not. So I see that when people aren't clear about the why, there's trust and confidence is kind of lost, and
Yeah.
it makes it harder.
Yeah. I
How
think
about you?
also going on. Yeah. So I had a thought as you were talking about that in my experience, it's been the case where, the purpose, what we've talked about the MVP phase being is being that phase where we really nail down the fundamental and important features or important pieces of the business. And I think sometimes in for some of these that we've done, the MVP is just more of like, this isn't the final product, so we're not going to really put too much effort into it. We're not going to really
Mm.
put the effort that we should into it. And so they end up
Mm-hmm.
taking the MVP phase more casually. And so then, we may end up throwing away a lot of what we did for MVP because we're going to go a completely
Mm.
different direction. So like just being a little bit too casual about that process and not really thinking through how it could lead into the final product, or really trying to nail down those fundamental goals or
Mm-hmm.
key into the user experience process that you
Yeah,
that you talked about.
see
So
little layering on. Yeah, that's a really good point. I can see design. Yeah, it would be easier just to be thinking about something completely new versus like, well, let's leverage what was in the theme and how users are actually interacting with it first.
yeah, great question.
Yeah.
Any others? Trying to think of if there's, from the perspective of the audience, what questions they might have.
Yeah, I was thinking as we were chatting, people might be wondering why, like, what was the impetus to
Yeah,
to
to
make
come up with
to
the phase
evolve?
approach. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's a great question. I think that um, for us, it's just we've just seen too many um, cases where trying to group everything into one kind of just conglomerate scope of work can get just overwhelming, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot more risk involved. And at the end of the project, everybody's just exhausted or frustrated with the outcome. And so I think
Yeah,
it's just been our way to kind of mitigate some of those issues that we've experienced over and over again.
definitely. And I think we've got time for maybe one last question.
Yeah.
Um, what are some of the system health checks recommended to be baked into retainer work for clients? Sounds like a good you question, Jordan.
Yeah, I think definitely, like when we start with MVP, we are going to take note of the, like, where the theme or whatever we're starting from, where the performance metrics are for that, for example. And we're going to keep a close eye on that as we iterate through the different phases to make sure that our additional features and design aren't negatively affecting the performance to a detrimental point. So, but yeah, I think part of the benefit of the phase approach in that, to kind of answer that question also, is that, as we do the MVP launch first to that really performant, and we got all those metrics in a good spot for MVP, that as we gain more data from the MVP launch, moving into the second phase, we can kind of, again, course correct as we need to, or we might gain insight of things that we need to pay attention to as we develop the rest of the site and the rest of the design.
Yep, I think you said that really well.
All right, well, 2 seconds here. So thanks for joining, and hopefully you learned a little more about the phase approach, and yeah, we hope to see you next time.
Totally. Stay tuned. We've got more Overdose and Chills coming.